Okay, so I'm going to just jump right in. So hardware prototyping 101, getting started and getting to market. So a quick outline of where this conversation is going to go. Talk to you first of all, how to get started on your development process. Like you got to start somewhere, right? Next will be managing costs and developing your price point. Because once you've got, okay, I've got a prototype here, I've got a product ready to start kind of selling, but how do I know that this is going to be profitable? How do I know this is really going to work? And then, okay, now you've got some numbers around this. Now you have to market your product and get people excited about it. And then, okay, now people are excited. Now I've got to launch it. Now I've got to say it's ready to buy. And then I'm going to cap this off with my story of starting up my company and, the really ugly look of the things in the beginning to what everything looked like at the end. So, okay. So I want to put this illustration here up front because product development, especially for hardware, but also is true for software, you have this balancing act. And this is particularly true in young startups, but it's also true in bigger organizations as well, kind of on a team by team basis. But you're always balancing your resources against your time. All right. So if you don't have a lot of resources, everything is going to take you a lot of time. There's just no way around that. And if you've got a lot of resources, you can shorten that time cycle. So a lot of startups, when you're, yep.
Charles, sorry to interrupt. Is the screen supposed to be moving now, the slides? We are still, or are we still on slide one?
Oh, okay, weird. I've been forwarding my slides, but
there we go. Okay.
So most startups, because you don't have a lot of cash, you might be bootstrapping. Maybe you've got a small government grant for $30,000 or something like that. So your resources are very restricted, and really the only thing you've got is time. Okay. Sometimes you can get to having more resources by leveraging co-ops. You get friends and volunteers to maybe help you out, things like that. But in most cases, time is the only thing you've got and resources are not. Okay. So how to get started in the development process. Let me just move this off to the side here. So, all right. So part one is understand who your customer is, okay? And so that includes demographics. So, is your customer a 28-year-old woman who has a master's degree in physics, or is your customer a 35-year-old man who has an MBA who's been working at an accounting firm? The job role, okay, is does the person, like the guy at the accounting firm, are they an accountant? Are they a CPA? And then for the woman, is she an engineer at an aerospace firm? You want to be able to identify these things so that way you can start to formulate the language and how do you talk to these customers. It's very different when you're developing a technical product that you're selling, hardware, versus if you're selling something like makeup. Now, next is decision power and spending authority. So decision power is really along the lines of, okay, does this person, are they the ones who say yes and no, I want to buy this product? Okay. Or do they not really have that kind of decision power? If you're looking at B2C, business to consumer, then generally you have a very small range of decision power people that you're focusing on, okay? Because I go into a store, I want a product, I'm the only person making a decision there, and generally I've got spending authority as well. If you are selling B2B, then you've kind of got some layers around your decision power and your spending authority. So you might have a technical person who is going to use your hardware product that has decision power that, yes, this hardware product solves my team's problem, but that person doesn't have signing authority to buy this $10,000, $500,000, $1 million product. So they've got to go to a vice president of the company to get that spending authority, okay? So when you have layers there, your sales process becomes a little bit more complex. So understanding who your customer is, and it's not always just one person, that's very important. Next, what is your customer's pain point? What's the problem to solve? And this is a very common question that a lot of new founders get stuck on. So new founders, you might have a product, you might think you're solving this kind of problem, but no, you're really solving something else. And the classic way to think about this is when you think about marketing and you think about commercials from Apple, okay, and they say things like think different. What problem is that solving, right? It's not obvious necessarily to us technical people, but the marketing ploy is playing to a person's emotions. Or if you see Nike, and you see an athlete running, okay, their shoes. You're solving a problem, they're nice shoes, okay? But in the commercial, the pain point that you're solving for the customer is this person wants to be like that athlete. This person wants to be having an adventure, those kinds of things, okay? So try to evaluate what is your customer's pain point. So when you're dealing with a technical hardware problem, the pain point really is maybe I'm making some factory toolkit, okay? And my pain point is I'm solving one key part of the manufacturing process for this customer, okay? I'm enveloping it in some larger product, but this is the pain point here. And when you can answer that key question, you can also, this plays into later the minimum viable product, and we'll get into that. But you don't necessarily want to start by having this massive suite of products or having your key pain point problem solver wrapped up in a bunch of features and everything like that from the get-go, okay? Because then you'll get a lot of confusing signals. Are you really solving the right problem? All those kinds of things. So answer that question, that key pain point, develop your MVP around that, and that helps you go forward with a lot more clarity. Next is understanding your market, business to consumer or B2B, and SME versus enterprise. So consumer is pretty straightforward. You're selling something like a watch or shoes. You've got an end customer, single decision power, single spending authority, and then it's demographics based on age and jobs and incomes, things like that. B2B, it's a little bit different. It might be certain size businesses. Is it a business that earns about 50 million in revenue, or is it a business that earns $1 billion in revenue every year? And SME, is it a small and medium-sized business that would be kind of more around the 50 million a year range? Or is this enterprise? Is this somebody, like a Toyota manufacturing company where they're all over the world, or Samsung, and they need an enterprise product to roll out across all of their offices or something? Both of those have very different sales models. They have very different purchasing power. So you would have different sales models when you're selling to an SME versus to an enterprise. And both would have very different contractual commitments when you're entering those organizations. So if you're going from zero and I'm selling to enterprise, there can be a lot of friction in the early days that you have to be aware of. Because they're going to roll it out to all their organizations, something like a big software suite. They want to know it actually works. So do you have any proof? Do you have any case studies, things like that? If it's an SME level, then they might be a little bit more willing to take a risk on something new because that differentiates them from their enterprise competitors, okay? So you can look at both of those markets, and then as you evaluate your product and the pain point and all the other details, you can understand on the B2B level, which market are you really aiming for? And it's okay to start with the SME as your early entry into the market and then move up to enterprise. That's a very common thing that companies do as they start to scale. All right. Let's see here. There we go. Okay. So now part two, MVP. We briefly touched on this. So this is your post prototype. Okay. So your prototype is just your proof of concept. Does, all the pieces cobbled together, do they actually work the way I want them to work? Do they solve the problem I think I'm supposed to be solving here? And when you start to put this together a bit more into an MVP, you want to be able to focus on design. Design, it needs to look nice, okay? You don't want it to look like this thing just came right out of a lab, okay? Even if you had it professionally designed, try to make it look a little bit more elegant than just a box, okay? So, there's really a lot to be said about designs. Like if you're designing a Wi-Fi network device or something like that, you know, you look at Wi-Fi routers in the store and now, and they all look like spaceships. Okay. Why does that add anything to the functionality? Probably not, but people kind of latch onto that. Like, wow, this looks cool. This would look so cool on my shelf next to my PlayStation or whatever. Okay. So think about those kinds of things as they relate to your product, because they're just, don't discount some design factor. You don't have to make everything look like a spaceship, of course. Functionality, make sure that your MVP keeps the focus on the customer's core problem. So when you interview your early customers and you find out, okay, hey, I've got this idea. Are you interested in buying this? Okay. And does this is the problem that you're trying to solve? How much would that save you and everything like that? Sure. Then make sure you actually make a product that addresses that very specific thing that you have learned about. Because if you start adding extra bells and whistles, and then later you go to that customer to try to get feedback, if one of those bells and whistles doesn't work, that's all they're going to talk about. They're not going to talk about, did you really solve my problem? Okay. And then that becomes kind of muddy information that you're trying to evaluate. Am I really hitting the nail on the head in the market here? Or am I missing the mark? So adding bells and whistles is great once you have validated your core thesis on the functionality and you know that that is the product that you can now roll out to the whole market. You're always going to have a version 2, version 3 of your product, and the more customers use it, great. You know from your early validation with the MVP that you're nailing that core product, that core problem solving exactly the way you should be, and all the other stuff is just icing on the cake. Now, some key points to remember with the MVP, it should be optimized for quick iteration and verification. Again, if you're focusing on the core problem that you're trying to solve for your customers and not adding all the bells and whistles right now, then that allows you to iterate quickly. Okay, so if you think you're solving this one problem, your customer says, yeah, you're not quite getting it. It needs this or that. Okay, fine. Now you can iterate and you go back again. Are we solving this core problem? Okay, but if you got all these bells and whistles there, then you've just added so many other layers to your iteration that's going to slow you down on your time and your resources spread there. Now, the MVP is not always the cheapest version of your product. And my company is a perfect example of that. Our MVP cost us like $800 to make, and I was turning around and selling it for $2,000. And that's not a really big margin for hardware. But I had a couple of like startups actually want to buy my product because they needed the capability of my hardware product in some project that they were doing, not 3D printing necessarily. They just wanted this cool thing that my product did. And I had one startup that came to me and they were kind of like, oh my God, I just saw the bill that we paid for this, $2,000, really? And it's like, yeah, we weren't trying to do anything bad to you guys. It's just it cost us this much to make. And this, you know, we had to make a profit on it. And so, the conversation calmed down pretty quickly, but nevertheless, it was a little bit of sticker shock because we didn't have this advertised price and so on. But the MVP does not have to be the cheapest version of the product, because once you start to get a price out in the market, your customers start to latch onto that. And you know, you go and raise that price later, you're going to encounter friction because you haven't added anything to the functionality necessarily. So the MVP can be as expensive as you need to make it just to sell a few in the market, and also to get that customer commitment. Are they really interested? Are they willing to pay for this? So you can sell a limited number of these for revenue and customer feedback. And I specify limited here because this is not something that's scalable. Okay. The MVPs are going to be something that are going to be very custom, very homemade, probably over-engineered in terms of bulkiness and everything like that. But the idea is to get these into the customer's hands, let them start using it, and they have to be robust enough so customers don't just break these things right away. But you get that revenue, you get that customer feedback, and then, okay, you know, we know people are actually using it and it is solving the real problem. We'll go on to managing costs and developing your price point. How much is your customer willing to pay? This is a key question to ask in the early days before you've even started building a product or anything like that, is find out, you know, is this something that your customer would buy? Okay, would you buy it? A yes or no? Okay, how much would you pay? you don't say, would you pay in this range or that range or whatever. You don't want to feed any information to them. You want to get them to tell you. Okay. So they might say, okay, yeah, this product solves the problem like it says, and it's going to save me so much money and whatever, then I'll pay $5,000 for it. Okay, great, awesome. And then that you can probably build this for $500. That's a pretty good markup there. All right. So it needs to be the market price, not simply what you think is the price. Okay. So that's where I pointed out, just don't go suggesting anything to potential customers, because then they'll start to get set into that. You want them to tell you. And then one customer might say, I'll pay 5,000 for this. Next customer might say, oh, that's great, I'll pay 15 for it. Oh, wow. Okay. That's interesting. That's a lot of extra money. Okay. So that market price is really what it needs to be. Now, as you start going into market, you might get some customers who, I'll pay 15. Great. Okay. Well, this other customer said 5 and they see the stickered price of 15 now. Whoa, that's way more than I'm willing to pay. To some extent, in the early days, you can also play around with some of this, like, well, our retail price is 15, but you know what? I value you as a customer, an early customer here. How about if I give you a discount? Now, you don't want to discount 60% or whatever, 75%, that might be a bit steep, but you might say, how about if I discount it 50% just to, let's get started, and you tell me what you think about this product. Now you're selling for 7,500 to the customer who was originally going to pay 5,000. Okay. And you're still making a nice little bit on the money if it only cost you $500 to make. So, but you have to be kind of careful when you do stuff like that, so it doesn't come back to bite you later, and your customers get to talking to each other and that kind of stuff. So that's for a later part of the journey in running your company. All right. Now, can you manufacture a minimum batch size of the product for much less than the retail price? Now, this is key because as you start looking at the components of a product, the labor that it takes, any shipping costs to bring these components in, any shipping costs to ship it out to your customers, storage costs, this is sitting in a warehouse, I'm paying for that space. All those things factor into how much is it going to cost me to make this product. And obviously, as you scale up, if you're making 100 of them, it's going to cost a certain unit price. If you're making 1,000 of them, the unit price is going to be less, but your upfront money is going to be a little bit greater than what it was for 100. And so on. You get up to 10,000, 20,000, whatever. Your unit price goes down, your profit goes up per unit, but you have to build a business to get there. So as you're starting to evaluate this, you want to look at, can you manufacture this and actually survive and make a decent profit and get to your next step on a minimum batch size. Okay. And so if that minimum batch size is going to cost you so much money that you're not even going to be able to meet that retail price that your customers are willing to pay, you're going to have to figure something out. Okay. So that's key there. At the same time too, if you're just barely, like 90% is cost, and then you can only mark it up 10% to get to those first customers, that's not a good deal either. Okay. So you have to do the math and really evaluate it to see, does this fit for what it is I'm really trying to do? And sometimes, sometimes there's just not a market opportunity. And then you kind of have to go back to the drawing board and figure out, how do I leverage this and make it into a market opportunity? Okay. So I touched on this just a minute ago. So the BOM, the bill of materials, you have to really think about your business and include everything that's going to go into the cost of making this product. Obviously, it's going to be parts. It's going to be capital expenses. Do you need tooling to make this? Do you need drill presses? Do you need CNC machines? Do you need electronics manufacturing equipment? Do you need anything to inspect your electronics, microscopes, all those kinds of things? All those are capital expenses. So you factor that in. Say if you buy a piece of equipment that goes into your manufacturing and it's $10,000, then that $10,000 gets amortized over a period of time, say 3 to 5 years, to where you recover that cost over your business lifetime. So, but your cost of buying that is upfront. And then when you factor it into your bill of materials, it's over a period of time. So labor. So if you are hiring people full-time, part-time, that kind of stuff, when you're beginning and you're in the early days, you can lower your labor cost a bit by, say, hiring co-op students, interns, things like that. treat them well, pay them, what they're supposed to be paid and everything. But nevertheless, that is a good way for startups to save a little bit of money in the early days on labor. Insurance. If you're making a hardware product, you will have liability insurance as a business, because if your product hurts somebody out in the market, and that company or that individual decides, I'm going to sue you, okay, that liability insurance protects you as a company. It's very important, and that does get factored in. Inventory turnover time. So I make 1,000 pieces of my product. How long does it take me to sell all of that before I need to make my next 1,000? Okay. If that sits there for a year or two, then I'm making too much and I'm selling too slow. Okay. But now that inventory becomes more costly the longer it sits there. And then that also slows down my time on making version 2 of the product, because when you're making hardware, you make a batch and that's a sunk cost. If you don't sell it, you throw it away. Okay. Estimated defects, that's standard manufacturing process. There's going to be some percentage of what you make that is just defective, and okay, yep, we'll replace it, no problem, that kind of a thing. And there's warranty coverage, obviously, that lends itself to that too. So warranty coverage, you don't usually have to get an insurance policy for it unless you expect to incur substantial losses as a company. In my case, with my company, we shipped about 1,000 units of our product worldwide, and over the life of the company. And out of that, we had maybe 5 of them that were returned to us as just broken beyond use and whatever. And obviously that would not have made sense to me to go to get an insurance policy for. It was cheaper. Okay, fine. I'm just going to send a brand new one to the customer, problem solved, and move on. Okay. So you're going to develop a BOM spreadsheet that helps you look at the math for different batch sizes. So you'll know your numbers for, if I make 100 of these, okay, here's my cost. So here's what I have to make as a business to make that sustainable and at least get to the next step. 1,000, 10,000, whatever. So you want to know what your breakpoints are. So that way, if you get investment or if suddenly, you get some good sales growth and everything like that, you know where you're headed and, what you're working with in terms of profit and what can you afford to hire your next employee and so on. So all of that is going to reflect your savings when you scale. And a special note on that, your target profit margin. So this is when you decide your price point in the market and what is my margin going to be. Try to put that against your smallest batch that you can actually sustain as a company. So if it's 100 pieces of your product or something like that, then I want to have a 75% profit margin. Peg that to that 100-unit batch, okay? So that way you know what you're working with. And obviously anything scaling beyond that is just icing on the cake. It's gravy, okay? So what you don't want to do is get into a trap of, okay, my sweet spot is if I'm making 5,000 of these to get the price down, more people buy it in the market, but I'm not there yet. I'm still at a 100, so I'm losing money. How long can you afford to lose money? And then you kind of get in this indefinite space of, if I don't make it, I'm out of money and I have to shut down. So always put your profit margin on your lowest batch that you can work with, and then everything else just flows from there. Okay. So profit margin considerations, direct sales, resellers, market fluctuations, moat. Okay. So as you start to think about what is my profit margin, I was just throwing a number out there, 75% margin, but that's not entirely how you do that. You don't just hit a dartboard and figure out what your profit margins need to be for the product. Obviously, the more money you make as a profit, the better, but you do have to factor in, if you're working with direct sales, okay, maybe you might have a salesperson working on your team. And that salesperson might want some commission for every unit they sell. So they have a base salary, say 40,000 a year, 50,000 a year, or something like that. And then, if your product is a $10,000 product in the market, then maybe your salesperson gets another $500 for every one they sell or something. And so that comes out of your profit. Okay. So you want to make sure that you have enough profit margin to cover that extra commission for the salesperson. If you have resellers in the market, then the resellers want their cut. And so the resellers, typically what they like to work with is about a 30% margin. Okay. So if I've got a product that's $100 and, it cost me $25 to make, then retail price is $100. That means I have to sell it for $70 to my reseller plus shipping and so on. So you have to make sure that you have that buffer in there and you're not caught out when you go to resellers. And the market fluctuations moat. This is a bit more ambiguous because there's a lot of things that can contribute to market fluctuations. One thing is currency. So my company, we had the price of our product in the US dollars because even though we're from Canada, and Canada is a pretty stable country, the exchange rate with the Canadian dollar fluctuated a lot. And we did not want to be caught out where, oh, it's 98, US to one Canadian dollar. Then, we're so close, almost parity, right? But then suddenly it drops. So if I'm buying a bunch of stuff at, 98 cents Canadian, almost US $1, and then suddenly the value of the Canadian dollar just plunges and my prices are in Canadian dollars, then suddenly that just wipes out my profit margin. Okay. But if I put it something at the US dollar and that same thing happens, then I suddenly start getting a 30% premium on, or whatever the spread in the currency exchange is. I start getting that as a premium in my revenue, which is pretty nice. If I've got my bills all in Canadian on my Canadian credit card, then, and I make 1.3 times that for selling my product, I have more money to pay my bills. Okay. So those things can help. Other market fluctuations that can happen would be just things that you've seen lately, the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, and the 2008 financial crisis. All those things can upset your momentum as a startup company. So you try as best as you can as a founder to insulate yourself from any of those things impacting your profit margins. Okay. All right. Another detail I'll throw in there as well is things like to consider, just, and this is a time-wise thing. If you have stuff manufactured overseas, like in China, you also have to consider Chinese New Year. So if you don't know, China basically shuts down manufacturing for a good couple of weeks in February. And if you're not prepared, if you don't get your orders of parts and whatever on a boat or on a plane in time before that shutdown happens, it's going to be 30 days before the factory ramps up again. Okay. And if you're like really running tight and you need this inventory now, you can get stuck. And people who don't know this, they'll get stuck one time and they'll never forget it again. What's the best way to estimate your customers' willingness to pay without having the actual product? Excellent question. The best way to do that is early market surveys. Okay. So when you think you've identified who your target customer is, try to find people who fit that demographic, fit the persona, if you will, and talk to them. Say, hey, I'm a student. Play the student card. Feel free to do that. It's very easy, and people like to respond to that. And say, I'm thinking about developing a product. I'm just trying to get some information to understand more about the market and where this might go. If I built this product, would this be something you would buy? Okay, very simple question. And then if so, okay, if the answer is yes, how much would you pay for a product like that? Okay, very simple. So these kind of little surveys, they can take 15 minutes of time. You can set up a Google Doc, do it that way, but always try to ask open-ended questions and keep it as brief as possible to give you the most information as possible. So a good example of, and there are ways to hack it, but you also have to be a little careful about this as well. So an example from my company, what we did in trying to figure out our price to put this on the market was my co-founder was active on the 3D printing channel on Reddit. And so now Reddit's one of those things, you start throwing a business survey up there, you're going to get skewered. Okay. So you don't always just jump out and do that. But if you're a part of the community already and, you're talking with people, engaging with people and whatever, and you say, okay, hey, I'm thinking about starting a business here for this kind of product, I was wondering if you guys would not mind helping just answer a quick survey. So my co-founder did that, and we got about 50 responses. Okay, so we didn't know exactly who specifically was going to be our person buying our product. We wanted to get that information. So that was some of the questions. Are you male, female? How old are you? Optional. Some people don't want to give their ages. And then what's your profession? So we kind of knew what jobs they did. And then, okay, would you buy a product like this? Yes or no? And then how much would you pay for it? And we got some trolling answers, like, yeah, I'd pay $10 for it or whatever. It's like, yeah, okay, we're going to discount that answer. But then most of the answers, we got 50 surveys back from random strangers on the internet. And we were able to then triangulate that to a price that, okay, this is kind of the price that we feel we're going to go to market with. That's the right price for this type of product. Now, if you're dealing with more industrial customers, that's where this gets a little bit more subtle, because a lot of industrial customers, $10,000 product, okay, that's a pretty big spend there. Would you be willing to buy this? You might get oh yeah, sure, we'll buy it. Is it ready yet? No, I'm still developing this. 2 years later, you finally have it ready. Okay. So you have to be careful of how you receive that information, because it's not a guaranteed thing. And industrial customers, this is some friction my company ran into when we were pivoting from a consumer market to an industrial market, was that industrial customers don't like to give you a purchase order before you have a product ready to ship. If you've got a product and it's ready to buy today, okay, you can close the sale. Okay, so you have to assume some of that risk, and that's kind of a tough position to be in, when you go to the industrial market. So this is why it's really important to do a lot of research ahead of time, and it's really important to build those relationships with who you think your potential customers are. Okay. Ideally, what'll happen is you get some customers who are excited about your product and they will be ready to buy it. So we did make some sales to industrial customers. Ford Motor Company bought my company's product. We had, let's see, NASA bought my company's product, so not really industrial, but obviously space stuff is pretty high tech and things like that. So, so we had a lot of companies that were industrial that bought this, but where we got tripped up a bit more was trying to figure out, okay, you like this product, but what did you like about it? How can we give you more? How can we grow the sales with you? That's where we sort of got stuck with some of these customers. So, usually you can get industrial customers to buy a product, but a lot of it just depends on that price sensitivity. So the higher the price, you really have to have a polished sales model, and maybe somebody who's very familiar with selling into the industrial customer base to help you out. Okay, so hopefully I answered that question. If I haven't, feel free to jump in the chat again and raise a question for some further clarification. Okay, so next item, are there any regulatory barriers, and what do approvals cost? So I just listed some regulatory barriers there that people encounter. And my company, we were sort of lucky that we were able to bypass any of the regulatory barriers that could have come our way. And I'll get into that here in a second. Okay, so each of these regulatory barriers has an approval process. You can hire engineering firms or firms that will take you through the process and get these approvals for you. But there's a typical process around it, lots of paperwork. There's usually, you're paying, if you contract out to a firm to help you through this, then you're paying their fee on top of any other form fees and things like that. And none of that guarantees that you're actually going to get the approval. It just basically takes the headache away from you, and somebody else is dealing with the nuance of these forms and all that. But nevertheless, it's still like, if you get a no, okay, why did I get a no? What do I have to do? And so on. So UL certification, it's particular here in Canada, but it's also recognized in the US and to some extent in Europe, not quite as much. That basically goes down to things like electrical safety, any kind of wireless safety, things like that. And so, but electrical and heat are the two biggest things for UL certification. So in my case, my company got busted. We not really busted, but we were exhibiting at Ontario Place. I forget the exhibition. It happens every year, non-pandemic years. Where so we were sponsored by PayPal Canada, I think it was, to have a little booth and demonstrate our printer and everything like that. And this inspector starts walking around and looking at all the electronics, and she sees us, these young founders and whatever, and it's like, oh, does this have UL certification? Like, no, this just a hardware product. It's a 3D printer, and we didn't make this printer, we just made this little tool head. And then so this inspector started looking real closely at everything, and so the printer had the UL certification on it, the power supply, standard off the shelf, retail kind of power supply, like a laptop. And then she started looking, at our little hardware piece for extrusion printing materials. And, does that have heat on it? No, it doesn't have heat. And so she gave me this really big education on it. She was like, I have the power to shut your booth down, blah, blah, blah. And I had never encountered that before. And that's where I learned about UL certification. And as I started really looking into the details of the requirements, first of all, because we didn't have heat, okay, I didn't have to worry about that. Second, our little add-on to a 3D printer didn't have its own power supply. We used the power from the 3D printer. So I was able to bypass UL sort of just by a lucky accident that we didn't have power to deal with or heating elements to deal with, okay? So that's not always the case. Most people are going to have a power supply and some other things on their products. So UL certification is something that you would have to have. I know other founders in the advanced manufacturing space that have had to spend six figures, $100,000 in several years to get a product UL certified. So it can be a lot of friction to get a product to market. FDA, you're all aware of that. Food and Drug Administration in the US. You want to sell a medical product in the US. If you want to sell food in the US, all of those things have to be FDA approved. CE is the European standard. Now, the goofy thing about Europe is the European standard sort of requires you to self-certify and say, yes, my product does meet all of this like massive book of requirements, right? But if you're wrong, there are massive penalties in store for you. And as a young company, you are not going to want to be hit with like a $60,000 fine from Europe. Okay. So you can still get firms to help you through this and everything like that. But nevertheless, the process still is based around some sort of self-certification. Okay. And FCC is the Federal Communications Commission. Usually that has to deal more with like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, any kind of, communications connectivity. So anyway, all of those, look at those regulatory barriers, make sure that you understand them very well. If you don't, find advisors who do understand them better than you, who can fill you in on what needs to happen with respect to your product and what it's going to mean for your timeline of getting your product to market. Okay. And then of course, costs, any of those applications, you want to factor that into your bill of materials cost. Okay. And then finally here at the bottom, let me just see if I can move this so I can see what I wrote here at the bottom. There we go. Supply chain, local manufacturing versus outsourced. So I touched on this briefly with the comment about Chinese New Year. It's very common when you think about manufacturing to look at both, can I do it locally or can I do it outsourced? And so my company did a mixture of both. We got a lot of the parts manufactured locally, and then we did the assembly locally. And the advantage of having things local is that if there's a problem, then you can actually go to, and I see another question in the comments, I'll in the chat, I'll get to that here. So with local manufacturing, if there's a problem, you can go to that actual manufacturer. You just drive up the street, drive to the next town, whatever, fly to the next city if it's, within flight distance and stuff. But nevertheless, it's within this country, and you can usually resolve an issue pretty quickly. If it's outsourced and it's overseas, Then you've got bigger time zone barriers, you've got cultural barriers, holiday barriers, any other demographic issues, a war breaks out, all those kinds of things that can impact your supply chain. And we saw this in the early days of the pandemic. China, shut down because of COVID over there. So then factories over here weren't getting their parts and they had to shut down. So it can have a ripple effect. So you want to pay attention to your supply chain. And there's no right or wrong answer here. Okay. Lots of companies get their stuff manufactured in China. It's perfectly fine. Happens all the time. So, and lots of people get their stuff manufactured locally. What you have to really hit on is what is the best for my business. Okay. So for my particular company, it was best to actually get things manufactured locally because we weren't selling 10,000 units a year kind of a thing. So it was smaller batch sizes. So I could go locally to a machine shop and say, hey, can you, we need these metal covers for our mechanics. Can you build the metal covers? And okay, we'll order 500 of them, something like that. And that made a lot of sense. It was, we were able to go to our grant agencies and say, hey, we're spending money in Canada, we're helping to create jobs, all that kind of thing. So, all right, last part on this slide, and then we'll maybe give a minute or two for everybody to take a break before we jump in to the next little bit. So you want to estimate the sales cycle time, and this strongly influences your revenue cycle and paying the bills. So I touched on this a little bit earlier. Sales cycle time, if you develop a product and it takes you 3 months to close a sale, okay, then that is a parameter that you factor into your business cycle, okay, that, okay, does this work? Can I continue to sustain this? If you find your sales cycle is 9 months, okay, then you start to work on what's called the sales funnel. Okay, so the sales funnel is exactly, you have this big broad net in the beginning, it goes down into the narrow neck of a funnel. If you find your sales cycle is very long, you have to really broaden that neck and bring a lot more customers into those early conversations so you get enough that start to come regularly in that narrow neck of the funnel for your business to be sustainable. Okay, because if you are only bringing 10 customers in to that wide part of the funnel, and 3 of them make it to that narrow neck where you close a deal, that might not really be enough to sustain your business. Okay, so you really want to look at that sales cycle time, and start with a hypothesis of how long do you think it'll sell, and then as you start living it, you'll get an idea like, oh, okay, again, you start with a lean team and everybody's hustling and that kind of stuff, but start to get that data as quickly as you can. Paying your bills is going to factor into that. So if your sales cycles are 9 months long, and then you've got to order a bunch of parts for your product, your suppliers are not going to wait 9 months to get paid. You're going to have to figure out how to pay those suppliers within 30 days typically. Okay, so all that becomes this big juggling act. So knowing your sales cycles time at least helps you figure out, okay, what's the next part of the chain here I have to juggle. All right. Okay, um, so the early marketing should be one-to-one with your direct customers. And that's very important because you need that customer feedback. You need to know for certain that you are truly solving this problem before you start really going full speed ahead. Okay. If you're missing the mark, okay, this is the time to figure that out, because once you've invested, I have seen 3D printer companies where they pre-sold whatever 10,000 printers and made a lot of money, like $3 million or something on this. And they ordered this whole batch of parts and stuff from China. It all came in, all their money was spent now. They start trying to assemble these printers. The parts don't go together. Okay. So huge mistake, big loss of money, big loss of momentum and things like that. And, so that's kind of a little bit of a different mistake here, but it's the same feeling if you really just start scaling up and you find out, oh, wait a minute, we're not really solving the problem that makes us a bunch of money. I made one person happy or 2 people happy or something like that, but the other people that I thought were the same category here and everything that we're going to buy this product, they don't like it and this doesn't do anything for them. Okay, I'm missing something, right? So the early marketing really needs to be one-on-one with direct customers, and then you keep repeating it. Okay, start with a couple. Okay, fine. I figured it out for these two customers. Go to a third, get up to 10, get to 20, 100, and so on. Get it to where it's a repeatable enough pattern that it becomes a lot more familiar, and you build your confidence that you're truly solving the problem. You're truly on to something here. So one-on-one marketing with direct customers is low cost. It doesn't really cost any money because you're getting face time with the customers, like having a cup of coffee or something like that. Okay. But it does cost you time. Okay. Which that can be valuable. So you don't want to waste it. You want to keep it as focused as possible and really, keep the conversation on target with those customers as well. A good benefit is you get immediate feedback. So if a customer doesn't like a product, you're going to know right away, okay, I don't like this product and it's not working quite this way, or I'm having this problem or something like that. Now, a cool thing about these one-on-one things with your direct customers, these are typically really long-term relationships, because later on, if you continue to be successful and grow and meet these milestones and things like that, and you get to a point where you're raising a Series A round or something, I'm going to talk about funding raising here in a little bit here, but in that case, a lot of those investors might want to talk to your early customers, okay? And these one-on-ones then become valuable references for you, because that investor who's about to write a $3 or $5 million check to your company talks to this customer, and this customer says, oh yeah, this founder, was in my office, 2 or 3 times a month, making sure everything works well. I saw the evolution of their product from the beginning. It was a little bit rough. No, it didn't quite work and solve our problem, but we talked about it. They went back to their team and improved the product, brought it back, and so on. When investors get a story like that, it carries so much weight. It can really, really make a big difference in a round. And it just shows that you have attention to detail as a founder and you care about your customers. Okay. All right. And the fundraising point, I'll park that for a minute and I'll bring that up in a little bit here. Okay. Next is know your customer and where you can get their attention. Okay, so your early customers are going to be one-on-one. You're not going to find a one-on-one on social media necessarily. This is sort of like after you've got those one-on-one conversations out of the way and you kind of feel like you've got a formula now for selling this more in the market. So you want to grow this customer base. So social media is one place where you can get the attention of customers, depending on the market you're after and the demographics and all that stuff. Search engine ads are very valuable as well. My company used those. And then, of course, trade shows. Those are all valid ways to get yourself in front of customers, get your product in front of customers, and build those sales conversations. You want to balance your marketing efforts with available resources. Again, this goes between time and money and all that other stuff from the very beginning here. Beware of platforms that market to you to get you to spend more. Okay. So social media platforms, Facebook makes money on ads, right? And so if you're a startup and you're advertising on Facebook, Facebook might just decide to change their algorithm and lower your rankings and your visibility. And oh yeah, we'll up it again, but you got to pay us more money. You're already paying us this baseline that was successful for you before, but it's not anymore. Pay us more, right? And so you have to really look at that closely. Is this giving you the value that you need? Same thing for Twitter, same thing for Google ads, and things like that. My company, we basically had enough play money every month where we spent about $100 on social media ads and search engine ads, just to see if did it bring in a couple of extra people every month, and we would track it and things like that. But just be very careful, when the platforms start hustling you to get you to spend more money, that you're going to get the value for that money, because otherwise there are companies that spend 10,000 a month on Facebook, and they get stuck in this trap and they don't have a way of knowing if that's getting the value. There are also platforms that will handle marketing for you as well. So we'll get into that here. So marketing in more detail, social media, the costs can be anywhere from just low dollars to a lot of dollars, depending on how much you decide to spend and how valuable it is to your business. So B2C, consumer market, typically you're going to go to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter. You're going to look for the influencers and try to get their attention, all that kind of stuff. And it can be very valuable and stuff can go viral, but it has to fit the product and has to fit the market. You really have to be very careful when you're on social media and not try to look spammy and not try to market to the wrong audience. So there's some finesse there that has to happen. B2B, a good example of a B2B platform to do marketing on is LinkedIn. So several ways you can do that. One is obviously you can buy ads on LinkedIn, and LinkedIn will put those in front of customers in a very similar business model like the social media stuff, the other social media platforms for B2C. Now, where LinkedIn can get a little bit more nuanced and it can be very useful is there are often specialized groups of professionals on LinkedIn, and you can become a member of those groups. And sometimes you can talk to the admin in control of that group. You don't want to spam the groups because then they might kick you out, right? So but sometimes you can talk to the admin and you can say, hey, I've been a part of this group for a period of time, and conversations, watching them, participating in them, things like that. And I've got a product that I think might really solve the problem for a lot of people, but I'm trying to be careful. I don't want to be spammy here. What do you recommend is the best way for me to share this with the audience and not have it be spammy? Would you endorse something like that? And a lot of times, the admins, once you start to talk to them, will tell you what the boundaries are and what you can and can't do. And but if you find a group where they say, yeah, sure, would you like to do a presentation? Maybe we'll organize one for the group. Okay, that's great. Now you can do it to where, okay, I'm going to give this sales presentation. Everybody knows in the group that this is going to be a sales pitch, right? And so not everybody has to join on your video and listen to everything, but nevertheless, you get a very focused audience of people who might be your customers listening to you talk about your product, okay? So this is where social media can be very advantageous. So some of it's going to be like a direct cost of some money, some of it's some time and some hustle, so there's lots of ways to play that. Okay, search engine ads, already discussed that. So, you can spend just a few dollars every month, sort of like buying a lottery ticket here and there, or you can spend, a lot of money. So if search engine ads are really effective, if you're tracking this and you're finding out that, so in my company's case, we had about 50% of our customers come to our website from Google. Okay, so for us, it was kind of like, okay, they were going to be searching for this product anyway. We put an ad up there. It just kind of helps them double down on, yes, this is the company we're looking for. And so it was worth it for us, but we did not spend a ton of money. At the most, I think in a given month, maybe $200 or something like that. So it can be very cheap, which is also very good for a startup. Okay, trade shows. These cost a ton of money and they take a lot of time for planning. And then you have to have a proper process for later sales follow-up. You don't want to put all this investment into a trade show and then you get back to the office and you are just wiped out and you've got a ton of emails in your inbox and you've got this big stack of business cards and whatever from the trade show, and it takes you like 6 months to get through all of them and follow up with people. You're going to lose the value of what you invested in that trade show if you do that. So you really have to turn around those conversations very quickly. Now, there's some nuance to doing a trade show as well, because trade shows, you get a lot of what people could cynically call tourists. They're working for some big company and hey, they got to go travel to a cool country and meet a bunch of cool people, drink some beer and whatever after the trade show. And they're just saying yes and being all friendly to everybody. And then they get back to their regular jobs and it's like, who are you again? Okay. So when you start to work through the nuance of this, and this is a whole nother big topic of a sales conversation, you want to keep, if it looks like this customer that's really interested, you want to keep the conversation directed towards action and not just like, oh, hey, yeah, we were real friendly. Remember me, and that kind of thing. So anyway, other things to contend with trade shows that are very specific to hardware is if you are going outside of your home country, then you have customs to deal with in another country, and it can get very sticky. So a great example, I was with my company, we did this huge trade show, 300,000 attendees for this big manufacturing trade show in Dusseldorf, Germany. And we were trying to make this new product, get an actual production prototype ready to demonstrate, and it was down to the wire. Our time schedule was just so tight, and so there was no way we could have shipped this on the trade show time schedule. Usually a trade show has a logistics company. If you go through the logistics company, they will notify you, hey, we need to pick up your skid of product by this day and whatever, and then we'll track it for you and we'll have it there for you and whatever. Usually that's like a couple of months before the show. Okay. And we knew we weren't going to make that. Okay. Um, the benefit of doing it through the logistics company is a little bit more expensive, but you get white glove service and it's usually guaranteed to be there. It's like, no hassle, right? But in our case, we were like, oh, you know what? We have a DHL account. We get this massive discount with DHL, and DHL, they started in Germany, right? So we'll just do like 12 packages of our little bits and pieces here to Germany, and then we'll pick them up there and we'll assemble them. So interesting thing is that it all got to Germany at the trade show, but then because we didn't go through the official logistics company, they kind of didn't like us, and they put our boxes off to the side, and it was like, oh, we're looking for this box or that box, and no, we can't find it. So okay, that's fine. We finally got it all sorted, and like the day before, we finally found the last box that was missing, and we were able to put together our booth. So we did expect a little bit of a hustle there, so it wasn't a total surprise. But where it got really messy was coming back out of Germany, because when we shipped into Germany by DHL, by the small parcel carrier, the shipment gets classified as a permanent import. Okay. And so that means you're paying taxes. Okay. And so I had to, DHL handles all that, whatever. They send me the bill later on. And so I didn't even know about this. And then, we do our show. We're there for a couple of weeks. I shipped the stuff back out. Okay. And then it was because, again, with the big logistics company that was managing the trade show, and we had our little thing, and DHL was supposed to drive into the gate and just pick up the packages and whatever. There needed to be some extra special paperwork to get the stuff out of Germany that I got to learn about. And it was like, oh, okay, this is a headache. I'm already back in Canada, and now I have to deal with that. Anyway, long story short, I ended up having to go to the official logistics company, say, okay, our boxes are right there. I'm not going to mess with DHL now. Will you please pick this up and send it back to Canada for us? Okay. And so they wanted some paperwork and so on. They had a Canadian office, this big logistics company. So I worked through them. It took a month of run around with DHL, and then another month of working through the paperwork with the official logistics company just to get our stuff back into Canada from Germany after this trade show. And then I got the big tax bill from DHL for the first shipment that went into Germany. And it was like, wait a minute, I'm not going to pay this. This is like $2,000, or whatever it was. We brought the product back to Canada. And so then DHL wanted all this documentation. And then, can you prove to us that you brought it back to Canada? We show that it was delivered, but we don't show any DHL records that you shipped it back out. And I was like, well, yeah, DHL wouldn't pick it up. So I had to ship it via another company. But anyway, it was just this huge, huge mess. And it took a lot of my time, and just huge headache, 3 months of dealing with this before everything was all finally settled, to get DHL to write off the tax thing with the German customs and whatever. So anyway, trade shows can be a major headache if you try to hustle them too cheaply. Okay. But if you do them right, they can be really good. But you just have to be very organized in how you work those. Okay. Crowdfunding. Crowdfunding platforms are marketing platforms, and they will take a cut of the money you make to pay for that. So my company did Kickstarter. We raised $126,000, and Kickstarter took a percentage of that. I forget, it might have been 13% or something like that. And that was their cost, but they promoted on their platform, they promoted on social media, and so we got a lot of visibility with that. We would have probably paid, as a beginner company trying to really enter the market, anywhere between $5,000 to $10,000 to a regular marketing company without the crowdfunding, had we gone that route anyway. So the price of what Kickstarter charged worked out the same. Plus, the cool thing about Kickstarter is, it's pre-sales, so we didn't actually have to have whatever quantity of product ready to ship. It was kind of one of those ways for us to test the market to see, do these people actually want to buy the product before actually us building it. Okay. So subject matter content. So the cost is kind of not too bad either. So this is stuff like blog posts or newsletters. If you're an expert in your field, you might write a nice little blog post saying, hey, have you ever been trying to solve this problem? What would you think if you could do this and this and this? Well, tell you what, there's a product that does that, right? And then that blog post can start to rank on the search engines. You can start to leverage SEO in that, both the SEO words in the actual blog post itself, but then you can have these hidden words in the HTML that don't get revealed, but they get picked up on the SEO. So that way you can put your competitors in there, or, little things like that. So people search on that and they get you, lots of cool tricks you can play with that. But the big thing there, it takes time to build the market reach. Okay. So you write a blog post today and then another one tomorrow, and you keep just building this content. Over a year, you're going to rise up in the SEO rankings. You're going to search engine rankings and everything like that. You're going to have more of a presence in this field. Okay. But, do you have that amount of time as a business to build that? Most of the times you got a steady state of your business going. And then, yes, you still plan over the 12 months to build up the subject matter content. It's a good thing to do in a lot of cases. But you just have to realize this is not an instant thing. I don't just pay an SEO consultant and then next month I'm at the top of Google. Okay. So newsletters can also be helpful because you can get customers to sign up for your newsletters. Okay. And that becomes a mailing list. So then you're about to launch a new product. Okay. It was a hard slog to get your first product into market, but now you've got a customer base. So you launch your second product, go to all those first customers and say, hey, in our newsletter here, we're going to tell you about our Gen 2 of the product. And then you might get some inquiries for sales that just kind of happen on their own. So that can be a really good thing as well. All right. So now, move this. Hang on. I'm just trying to move the banner here so I can see what I wrote there. All right. So always verify the data around the results, A/B testing and ROI on your spend for marketing. And there are marketing platforms that collate this data. So one example is HubSpot. HubSpot is a CRM, and there are other CRM platforms out there as well. One is like a Centrix One CRM, I believe, which is a Canadian company. And anyway, some of these CRM platforms, basically, they have marketing engines built in them. So you can generate automatic emails to people. It'll put a little pixel in there that it'll track and feed the data back to you. If you have ads, you can, like on Facebook or something like that, you can have that feedback into the CRM. And so if a customer comes to your website based on clicking the ad, then you will get that information to know that, okay, this worked. This got somebody to look at my product and so on. Now, you have to be careful too with some of these platforms because a lot of their, like the free version of HubSpot is more just a basic CRM, which is great. But then if you want to use any of their marketing engine stuff, that's where you start paying for it based on how many customers you have in the database. So it's like if it's 500 customers or something like that, and then it's tiered. So if you suddenly get to where you have 5,000, 10,000 customers, then you're paying a lot more just to keep all those records there. And then you also start paying, like you want a certain feature of a service, it can get to be thousands of dollars a month. So just keep that in mind. If you got the sales to justify it, great. If you don't, and you're hustling, try to look for the lowest cost options you can. So, okay. So we have a question here in the chat. Approximately what percentage of your sales were directly from the Kickstarter page, and what type of external promotion did you do, social media promotion, and so on? Okay. Yes. So in the beginning, so we did not continue to do Kickstarter. We did Kickstarter. It was a one-time thing just to launch the product because we were brand new in this market. We had no idea. We were doing a consumer play. And so there was a lot of very unique timing and circumstance around us using Kickstarter. And Kickstarter is not the heavyweight crowdfunding platform today like it was back in about 2014, 2015. So you have to keep that in mind as well. It can still be very successful for launching a product, but it doesn't have the media attention like it used to. Anyway, so for us, 100% of our first year of sales were Kickstarter. Okay, we were very small, just my co-founder and I, and then we hired a few co-ops to help us with the assembly once we had our Kickstarter numbers and we knew what we were working with. So we put the product on Kickstarter. Our target was about $30,000. And Kickstarter was an all or nothing thing. And so if you don't hit your target, you get zero. And so we wanted to set our target low enough that we could actually do something with it. Okay, so if it was $30,000, okay, we could still manufacture this product, we could get it to market, and we could at least, live another day and figure out, what do we do next, right? It ended up going to 126,000. Okay, and the customers were coming in from worldwide. So this was also really cool information for us. We had customers from Japan, Russia, China, South Africa, Korea, the United States, Mexico, Canada, all over Europe. And it was really cool to see like us going from nothing to suddenly everybody around the world is excited about our product. It really made us feel good as founders. Now, the problem was, and I'll get into that with the part about my story here, was that these were consumer customers, and that's obviously what Kickstarter was designed for. But ultimately, that ended up not really being where we needed to go as a company. So anyway, back to the Kickstarter thing. We got the funding, and that was about 400 units of product. So we ordered in all the parts. Co-ops helped us build and ship the product. It was a big, hard thing to go from we're not making anything to now we have to have a regular organized way of manufacturing product that doesn't slow us down. We can't take 4 weeks to build 10 units of product when we got 400 orders waiting to ship. We've got to be able to build like 50 to 100 units every month. So how do we set up manufacturing to accommodate that without just having to have a team of 100 people, which would be ridiculous on the cost? Okay, so we had to really study our manufacturing and improve it. So the first 50 units, I think the first month, yeah, it was like 10 units because we were just going overkill on all the quality control and everything like that. Because obviously, if you're in a rush to ship and the quality control is not good, that's going to come back to bite you. And then if you do it overkill, obviously, then it's slow. So first month was about 10 units, I think. That was painful. Next month was 50 units, still painful. And then the steady state sort of got to be roughly around about 75 to 100 units a month of building. So to get to 400 units of shipping, it took us finally about 7 to 8 months, ultimately in the end. Now, what type of external promotion did we do? Obviously, we used our own social media to help promote it. And then Kickstarter used their own social media to promote this. Now, some of this was also a little bit of lucky accidents because a lot of media picked up on the Kickstarter product, which, we didn't really plan for, we didn't pay for, but it just sort of happened. So Glamour Paris picked us up. We had, I forget if Forbes picked us up, but like a lot of major media, just started picking this product up because it was kind of unique and everything that it did. And so okay, that was kind of cool to see that. So there was a little bit of a feedback loop on those things, and we did promote ourselves on our own social media, but we were kind of nobody, so it's not like we had 1 million followers or anything to do. So there was a lot. We weren't $1 million campaign or anything like that on Kickstarter, because the Pebble watch, for example, that was 10 million, right? That was just like off the charts, one of the records on Kickstarter. Ours was a lot smaller, but making 6 figures on Kickstarter is still a very small percentage of all the campaigns. So we knew that we were still in a very select group of companies on Kickstarter. But when you're manufacturing hardware, 6 figures, $126,000 in our case, it did not go very far. So like by the end of year 1, it was like, okay, we need to keep the sales cycle going. So, okay, so hopefully I answered the question there. If not, ping me again in the chat. Okay, so launching to market. So crowdfunding, as I mentioned, ideally it's for B2C consumer. And the nice thing about crowdfunding is it's pre-sales with lower risk for the business. And so I'll get into that here a little bit, because when with a platform like Kickstarter, you you have to have a working product. Okay, it can't just be a rendering or anything like that. There are specific rules around that. But okay, so you invest a little bit, you get a working product, you do a nice video, some photos, you show some results, those kinds of things. Um, and you just build that one thing. So if it doesn't work out, that's all you invested. So it's a pretty low risk if you think about it in the bigger picture of things when you're trying to start up a company. The other thing is that if so there's the nuance here that if you are successful on Kickstarter and say you get past the six-figure mark, and you've raised $500,000 or something, is pretty respectable, and okay, you do everything right as a company, you follow all the advice, you bring in experts to help you get manufacturing going, and just something out of your control goes wrong and you're not able to ship your product, you have to shut your company down, bad news, okay, that sucks. um, your risk exposure as a business, because you raise the money on Kickstarter, is limited because of the crowdfunding platform. Okay, so a consumer can't sue you, okay, for, if your product was $2,000 or whatever, they can't say, hey, I want my $2,000 back or whatever. It still sucks. Everybody could empathize with that, because if you've ever put money on Kickstarter and then it just evaporates, nobody likes to be in that position. But as a business, you try to give it your best effort, so, and things can go wrong. Now, the next bullet there, pre-sales on your own website. This is where the liability can hit you as a company, okay? And so if I have my own website as a company and I decide, you know what, I don't want to pay Kickstarter any of that margin there, I want all that money to myself, and I do pre-sales on my own website, and then for some reason my company shuts down, even if I did everything right and it's out of my control and whatever, because I did it this way on my own website, then my company would actually have liability. And depending on how I've set up my company structure, do I have any liability for the board of directors, which would include myself as the CEO, that kind of a thing. All of those factors play into my exposure on, can somebody sue me or try to sue my company and just make things tough for me and whatever. But the risk is absolutely there if you do pre-sales on your own website. It's not so much there if you do it on crowdfunding. So just a key distinction there to keep in mind. Next is direct sales. Pretty self-explanatory there. You've seen direct sales and how they work. And most people get a good sense of that. And depending on where you're selling to consumers or to SMEs or enterprise and so on, there are salespeople who are really good at what they do. So if you're a technically minded person and your technical engineering stuff inside and out for your product, don't discount the sales experts for being sales experts. Okay, they're not going to be able to talk the tech like you. They will learn what to say, right? But they will know how to read the social cues and close the sale. That is what they're really good at. So if you find a good sales guy, and Kitchener-Waterloo has, with the startup scene here, there have been times here and there over the past 10 years or so where companies have complained that it's just so hard for them to find salespeople. They've got all the technical people, right? They've got software developers, and in some years it's hard to find those, but but salespeople, right? So they can be, if you find a good salesperson, that person can be very valuable to your company because they're the ones bringing in the cash. Okay, the product obviously has to stand on its own too, but that salesperson is the one closing the deals. Next is resellers. And so depending on your type of product and your type of market, sometimes your way into the market is through a reseller channel. So a good example is, if you're making a car, okay, Tesla is breaking this model because they're not going through resellers, through local dealerships, all right? But every other car manufacturer goes through kind of a dealership network of resellers. If you look at computers, okay, you go to Best Buy, they're a reseller for desktop computers, they're a reseller for Apple, all those kinds of things. And you have to be able to factor those into your business model, and then you sell to the reseller, they buy the product from you and they try to move the inventory. Now, some things to keep in mind with resellers as well is if they buy this inventory from you and for some reason it just sits on their shelves, then they may come to you later and say, hey, can we work out a deal and you take some of this back, or, give us a discount on our next order or something like that because this product isn't moving. Okay. You have to contend with those. And then your sales process is towards those resellers, and you definitely want to take care of your resellers because they're your final channel, they're your gatekeepers to your customers. Okay. So and then your salespeople are basically having the conversation with those resellers, and then you train those resellers how to sell your product as well. Okay. So this is where the direct sales, the one-on-one in the early days, still comes back and helps, because your resellers, that your product might be very specialized and they might just be a general reseller. Okay. But if you help them know, here's how to talk to my customers, my end users, here's what to say, here's how to close a sale, here's what these users want, and any other questions, let me know. I'm happy to jump in and help you out, that kind of a thing. That helps your reseller move inventory, and then they're going to come back and reorder from you. Okay. So you keep moving inventory, the reseller's happy, you're happy, and the cycle just keeps going. And then you bring in another reseller and so on. Resellers can be great when you're dealing with customers overseas. Sometimes with my company, we sold to customers in Europe, and if we shipped directly to them in Europe, they would have to pay the value-added tax and whatever when they picked it up, depending on the value of the product. If they bought it from a reseller, they might have had some avenues where they could have done a tax write-off, or not had to pay tax because they work at a university or something like that. So resellers can be a way to reduce friction in local markets. And then also sometimes you get people who they know the local customs, they know the local language. I had a reseller that reached out to me from India. I know zero about the market in India. Okay. And but my company was able to sell some product in India because this reseller that somebody else in my network helped verify for me was able to assure me that yes, they like the product. There are customers that want this product and they can sell it. And so I treated them like all my other resellers, gave them all the resources and so on. They bought stuff from me, and they were able to then take it to the Indian market and deal with any of the local stuff that I wouldn't have been able to deal with. So I was able to get a few extra sales that way. So resellers can be very valuable in the right kind of market. Okay, so now we're going to get into my story here. On the left here, you see a picture of some equipment on a lab bench. This is a CNC machine. I've got it connected to an air compressor, and the air compressor is pressing a plunger in a syringe. And so I was able to program a pattern on this CNC machine while having some air pressure move material out of a syringe. Okay. And therefore, I was able to 3D print custom materials that I developed in my lab for my PhD research. My PhD research involved printing with conducting polymers and biopolymers. The idea is to try to put them together in a system where you could electrically stimulate something, have it release a drug out of the biopolymer, and then biodegrade where nothing is left in the body after it's done its job. Okay, sounds pretty cool. It was pretty fun. It was a nice research project and everything like that. And then I was intending to go the academic route. The financial crisis of 2008 happened. And by the time I finished my degree and was trying to line up a postdoc, there was no funding for postdocs. There was funding for more PhD students, but not postdocs. Okay. So just kind of unfortunate timing there. But one of the things, because my background prior to this chemistry work was in physics. So one of the things that struck me in this thing that I built was that, okay, the fluid mechanics, the air pressure needed, the movement of the machine, the nozzle size and whatever was pretty similar for a lot of materials. Okay. So it wasn't like there was this, this material will only come out of this nozzle and not that other one and whatever. It was pretty generic. And so I thought that the 3D printing market was taken off by this time as well. So I thought, you know what? There's an opportunity for a lot of really cool materials that aren't yet even available in the 3D printing market. Sure, you can print plastic, you can do metal and things like that, but what if you could take something that's seafood waste like chitosan made from crab and shrimp shells, turn it into like an eco-friendly plastic substitute and, print stuff with that. So that was kind of the early ideas around this. And while I was getting my feet wet in the local startup scene, working at a couple of startups, I kept thinking about this idea, thinking, you know what? Yeah, somebody obviously is going to have this idea. It just seems like such a no-brainer. It's probably already on the market, and I don't even know about it, right? Um, Kept, watching the market. It didn't happen. Okay. And I kind of got burned out working for some of the other startups because it wasn't the types of jobs I was doing and the types of companies I was working for wasn't really what I wanted to do. So I decided to take the plunge and start my own business around this. And so some of the things that helped to formulate my idea of who my customer was back in my research days when I was talking to other researchers. Researchers like to compare notes, if you're doing similar areas of research. And I found that every other researcher wanting to do any kind of 3D printing with a custom material had developed their own little hack of some kind to accomplish what they wanted to do for research. So there wasn't any standardization. Okay. So I thought, okay, you know what? I understand the material science around this. I understand the fluid mechanics around this really well. So I think I could bring some standardization here, and then researchers buy this product and they can compare apples to apples when they talk about methodology. Okay, sounds pretty cool and everything technically lines up. Okay, great. But again, I had no idea on the business side. So we'll get to that. Um, Identifying my customer, again, I was thinking it was other researchers. And then as the Kickstarter thing came along, it was like, well, in the 3D printing market, researchers were using 3D printing, but so were hobbyists. So my thought was, well, I can help democratize some of the material selection for even the hobbyists. So then, companies like MakerBot were getting on the covers of magazines and selling millions of dollars of printers. So it looked like there was some pretty good opportunity to make some sort of hardware that could help them. I thought about, okay, do I make yet another printer? Because by this time, even on Kickstarter, every month there were another 10 new 3D printer companies trying to launch a Kickstarter campaign. So part of my investigation and, thinking about that was like, well, I got to differentiate myself. So do I make yet another printer? Because now my costs for building this platform are going to go up. They're going to be very expensive. Or do I make the thing that is the core of the functionality of what I'm trying to solve for my customer, which was being able to do 3D printing with a custom material? Okay. So I decided to go that route and make this little hardware add-on for any desktop extrusion type of 3D printer. So on the right, you can see one of my first prototypes. Okay. These are the ones that cost me $800 to build. So you can see there's some big aluminum rails in there. There's some CNC aluminums. There's this actuator, linear actuator thing that I paid like $100 a piece for. And sure, it did the job really well. Way over engineered, way heavy. There's no way I could have shipped this thing worldwide economically, but nevertheless, this is what I started with. So I took the DC motor off of the actuator and slapped on a stepper motor so it could work with a 3D printer. And we started with this as an early prototype, basically to be able to print stuff and show people the finished prints and say, all right, would you like to be able to do this? And what kind of material was it? And people would, be, wow, this is so cool. Yeah, great. Okay. But locally, word of mouth got around to some of the people in our audience that, oh, you've got this now. I want that now. So we actually sold a couple of these, and that's where, $800 to make. And I don't know, what should I charge for it? I'll charge $2,000 for it. Okay. And so this is where it all started. You can see it straight on the bench in the lab to the really ugly, rough looking prototype, way over engineered, very expensive, and so on. A lot of hardware startups kind of look like this. And in those early days, okay, I founded my company, got this far. First grant, I went to Communitech. They had a $5,000 business development grant. So, it doesn't exist anymore, but like every year there's various new little grants to come out with. So this $5,000 grant was like, okay, a grant is great because that means I don't have to repay it. It's not an investment. I don't have to give equity up, and short and sweet. the trick was I had to spend the money first, give the receipts to Communitech, and then they reimbursed me for that. But I used that to get my logo, to get my website set up, and to a portion of it to go to my first patent filing. Now, the patent filing, this is an interesting one, and this can be another whole topic to discuss, but it was not this piece of hardware. This piece of hardware was an example of the IP, but the IP itself is a little bit more abstract. So a good IP lawyer would walk you through that. So we had a number of claims that we said, we do this differently and that differently. Here's some prior art, ours is better, and so on. And we filed it as a provisional patent first because that's cheap and easy. It was about, I think the total was maybe 5,000, 3 to 5,000 or something to actually file that provisional. But the in the US market, the whole IP leverage works around first to file. Okay, so that's a line in the sand. And then if anybody comes after you with new patent filings, yours is the one that takes priority. Okay. Now, we played the long game on the patents because that was a way for us to spread out the cost. It cost us more over time to do that, but each time we paid, it was only a small amount. So we went from the provisional, which gave us a 12-month grace time, okay? And at the end of that 12 months, we filed a PCT, which stands for Patent Cooperation Treaty. And that's where there's like 140 countries in the world that have signed on to that treaty and basically said, yes, we'll respect each other's IP and so on. And the PCT filing gives you another 18 months. Okay, so 12 months and now another 18 months on top of that. The reason we did that route was because we were not really sure about our business model. Did we have one? You know, we got customers wanting to buy the product, but what is our business model? Is there something really here? So by not spending a ton of money filing a patent, a full patent right away and getting to spread it out over time, that allowed us to get our line in the sand and then take some time to figure out a business model before we proceeded to a full patent filing. So we kind of got the best of both worlds. And then finally, when we did the full patent filing, there was that cost as well. So overall, it was more expensive to do that, but it, you know, we had 3 or 4 years to really deal with that before the final examination of that patent happened. And that patent was awarded, by the way. So, okay. So next, in that same early stage, joined an accelerator. So Communitech had an early stage accelerator called Hyperdrive. We were part of the last cohort of Hyperdrive before they shifted it to Communitech Rev. And then now they have Fierce Founders, which is more female focused, which is great because we need a lot more women running companies. All right. So the accelerator was good because I was a first-time entrepreneur and I had no idea, does this thing have merit? It was a competitive application. There was something like 130 companies that applied, 5 got in, and my company was one of the 5 that got in. We were one of 2 that were pre-revenue. We didn't have anything that we were shipping yet. So when we did part of the whole thing was getting us ramped up to actually launch the product because, it's all about action here. You don't just sit around and say, all right, we're a startup, right? So you have to actually make some progress. So we decided then at the time that we're going to launch on Kickstarter, and we looked at Indiegogo, another crowdfunding site, and we just decided based on, the market reach that Kickstarter had, that was a safer bet. And we decided to stick with that one. So what you see here is you see a white box, okay? You don't see anything inside the box. And I'll tell you what this is because we use this for a lot of our crowdfunding pictures. There is nothing inside the box, okay? It is a physical model. So it satisfies, yes, this is a physical model. So we were looking at different ways to manufacture a case for a production version of our product. This was laser cut acrylic that would be cut in a certain way that you could fold it around the square edges, okay? But there were no mechanics inside there at all. We actually had to tape that syringe in there to get the photos for our crowdfunding here. The job that we had to do with this model was simply, one, we were testing out, would this even work for a proper case? And it wouldn't. It was actually a little bit too delicate to work. So we had one made, and we never used it again. But it did the job of at least getting people to look at the concept and see, oh, I see how this goes on to a 3D printer. I get it. Okay. And I can see roughly the dimensions and whatever. Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. So these were the pictures that we promoted on some of our early marketing efforts on social media, stuff that we had on Kickstarter and everything like that as well. So you can see it looks a lot cleaner than the really rough aluminum thing that I had made, right? But this still wasn't really a finished product. All right, so now we get to the manufacturing story. So on the left, you see one of our Kickstarter units, unit number 79 that we manufactured. So you can see the inside. This is a photo from that customer. So the outside is this powder coated steel and aluminum, and the inside is aluminum, but it's not powder coated. Okay. And so to keep our costs down, we basically said for the first whatever 50 you know pieces, 50 units we need to build, all those pieces, let's have the inside pieces not powder coated, just to save a few dollars, and then the outside is what needs to look nice. And this is Kickstarter. The people getting the first 100 units, they understand they're getting like the early stuff here, and it's going to be a little bit rough. Now, before we even had this bent metal box, okay, you can see on the right hand side a little bit more of the iteration. So the plywood box, that's actually a plywood box I built to go around the really rough prototype that I built in the very beginning. The reason we had that plywood box built there is because we wanted to kind of keep the mechanics a little bit secret. I mean, it was anybody in the market like who was an expert on the engineering would know like roughly what's going on in there, but there were a lot of people who they just wanted to use the product. They were also real smart people and whatever, but they had no idea how we were doing this cool trick. We were printing things like silicone caulking, we were printing cake icing and Nutella and whatever. It's like, what do you have going on inside that box that's doing that, right? So the plywood box there was mainly just to protect it from potential competitors before we had officially launched our Kickstarter campaign, because we didn't want anybody scooping us, and saying, oh, hey guys, this is how it works. This is kind of stupid, or, that kind of a thing. So we wanted to keep the hype up there. So the plywood box just sort of helped keep it hidden, and also to keep the mechanics clean. The little white 3D printed frame that looks really skeletal by the 3D printer there, that was actually sort of a middle concept. That was something we were thinking that could have gone inside that acrylic cut box. And but when we tested the mechanics of that, it didn't have any of the strength that we needed. So we scrapped that design really quickly. And so this is one of the neat things where, by using 3D printing to help us with some of the prototyping questions of what does the form of the design have to have, was useful. And we make one little version of a product, didn't cost us a lot, and yep, doesn't work. Okay, boom, next idea. Now the tall white plastic tower there, that was the mechanics on the inside were the finished product. And we were then trying to figure out, okay, what does the outside have to look like? And so the guy who helped us with the mechanical design of the inside to make it manufacturable, was doing the best he could, but he wasn't really an expert on the outside design. He was trying to kind of make something look cool and high tech like, and so he had this like heat formed plastic that he sort of went around and made it into a tower looking thing. It looked okay, but we looked at it and was kind of like, yeah, it's going to be expensive to make these things. If we try to get them mass manufactured, there's not really a standard process to make that shape unless you go with injection molding, which is hugely expensive. It's $10,000 typically just for one injection mold. And then if you have to change the design, you got to buy a brand new mold. So it's another 10,000 sunk. And so we went with the design that you finally see on the left-hand side there. And so you can see the early Kickstarter unit, and then you can see the ones that were after Kickstarter that we started shipping, and we stuck with that design, and it suited the purpose. We had no real reason to change it. So then market crash and first pivot. So all of the early stuff we were selling, Kickstarter was going to consumers, it was going to makers and hobbyists and research scientists, and get your own 3D printer, you figure it out, we'll give you, it's a stepper motor, 4 wires, and you just connect them to your board and blah, blah, blah. And what we learned was that, well, first of all, what happened in the consumer 3D printing market is the consumer 3D printing market crashed. It totally crashed because all these consumers that bought these 3D printers, some of them got burned on Kickstarter when the company failed. And then some of them also realized that, oh, wait a minute, 3D printing is a lot more technical than what I was expecting. I got to know how to design stuff, and oh, my nozzle got clogged. Now I got to take it apart and clean it, or something's messed up and whatever. And so consumers backed away from 3D printing. It wasn't as turnkey as people were hoping it could be. So then who else was left that really wanted our product? And that was research scientists. So when that first market crash happened, our revenue dropped really quickly, and we had to, we went like a year and a half really without paying ourselves because we just had every bit of money we made had to go into just keeping the lights on. So that was a really hard year, very depressing, lots of emotions on that. But what our research customers told us they wanted was they didn't want to have a PhD student or a master's student or an undergrad try to figure out how to connect wires to a 3D printer. They wanted something already connected and ready to go. Okay. So we were looking at that. And one of the things we decided was, well, we're not going to manufacture a 3D printer because we have no money, right? We still have this product, this inventory we got to move. So how can we really make all this work? So there were established 3D printer companies on the market that had good reputations and so on, and some with less certain reputations. And so we realized, okay, well, we got to partner with somebody. And our choice of partner is going to affect how our customers view us. So we have to make a really good choice here. So we went with Ultimaker because they had a really good reputation for just technical quality of their printers, customer support, all those other things. MakerBot was another one, but they were starting to have a lot of problems and a lot of complaints from customers, and they were turning their system into more of a closed source system to where us trying to be this outside company integrating with it, we were going to be locked out. And so Ultimaker was completely open source, so that worked well for us. So we came up with this bundle idea, and I had to hustle to make sure that Ultimaker would not try to go after us for selling this bundle. And at the same time, I wanted to be able to sell Ultimaker printers and have this all pre-integrated. So that meant I had to become an Ultimaker reseller. Okay. And so I had to hustle to get that conversation happening. And finally, we were able to go to CES one year. We had, planned, we had arranged to meet Ultimaker there and talk in person and tell them what we were trying to do. And the conversation went well. We became special resellers, and we weren't limited by territory. We could actually sell worldwide. So that was also kind of cool. And it worked out well. So, but this became the new product. So the first product, the Kickstarter version of the product, the extruder itself, the early bird was about $279 for a customer to buy. And it went up to roughly a steady state price around $375 or $399 or something like that, as we were just doing our regular sales. And then when that consumer market crashed, we realized we couldn't make it as a company with a $400 product in the market. We had to sell a ton of those things to pay our bills. So we couldn't just raise the price on the product because now the price had been established in the market too. So what we had to do was like adding this extra value, okay, by adding a printer to it and doing the integration and putting together a nice little user manual, adding in some consumables. Okay, now we were building more value here. So now we could raise the price. What do we want to raise it to? So we decided to put this bundle at $5,000. So we had a better understanding of the market and what price people would pay. And, we knew what our cost of the printer was. We didn't have to build it, that kind of a thing. So it was pretty easy to settle on the $5,000 cost. And a good thing about that, a nice little bit, a happy accident, so to speak, was the $5,000 mark was often enough. That was the limit that most professors could be the final sign off to be able to buy this product. Okay, because if it was $6,000 or $10,000 or whatever, they would have to go get, their department head's signature or whatever as well. So it helped us on the sales cycle a little bit. So this first pivot allowed us to tread water and survive as a company while we tried to figure out, okay, what's the scalable thing here? The research professors, I had one sale that I closed in 24 hours. I sent the digital invoice to the professor. He put his credit card up there, and boom, I had the $5,000 in my bank account the next day. And then typically the average professor took about 3 months to close a sale. from the first discussion to, okay, I've got the funding, let me send you the payment. Yep. So thanks for that, Jeff. And I'm trying to, I've got one more slide here. And so then I've had professors that have taken 9 months to buy the product. Okay. So this was not scalable for me, for my company. And ultimately, this is one of the things that we were stuck in for too long. So we looked at how can we scale. We added 2 syringes so we could do mixing of 2 component materials, pre-filled cartridges for consumables. And then finally we went to, okay, let's take our original extruder, let's add a control box to it, and let's turn it into a desktop injection molding thing to where the 3D printer prints the mold, okay? And so now we don't have to deal with the big factory mold things, and then you inject your rubber material in there. And so we tried to go to an industrial audience. It ultimately didn't work out because that was right at the tail end of things. And then COVID hit and whatever. So we were able to get that first little launch, a couple of sales on that. And then all the momentum just died right there with COVID. So that's kind of where we finished things off. And that is the end of the presentation there. So there was a lot of information there, and I was trying to share as much as possible in the 2 hours we had without kind of making it too boring. So hopefully it was all informative for everybody. So